10, Merrimack 24.
Glenn Cordelli, I represent Tufton Borough, Wilkesboro, and Oshipee.
Representative Ladd?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Rick Ladd. I come from Haverhill and represent both Haverhill, Benton, Warren, Landaff, Piermont.
And I'm Ruth Ward, and I represent Senate District 8, which goes from Dunbarton down to the river, the Connecticut River that is, and about 20 towns. So, here we are. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from August 22nd.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any corrections, additions? No. So the minutes are approved. Now, I'm gonna start talking about the yearly report discussion. We have gathered a lot of information, and we're still missing something. I had hoped that Senator Altshul will be here because she had some requests and she was gonna gather some information on some particular things, so. Let's talk about what should go into the yearly report, which is due in the end of November, so we have a little bit more time to check on things if we need to. Any suggestions?
Good afternoon.
Hello there.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you wanna put some of it over here?
No, it's the water on the floor.
Senator Altshul, I just mentioned.
Yes. And,
I'll remind you what it was.
oh, no, I know. Apologies to the committee. In my haste in getting out the door, I did not bring all my paperwork, and so I'll have to send it to you in a digital form. There were I had stacks for you, so I'm so sorry.
So the schools that you were concerned with, you don't have that data, right?
I do not have I do not have the packet with me, no.
Okay. Then we'll do that the next meeting,
Sure thing.
okay? We just started to talk about what ought to go into the yearly report. We still have a couple of times that we can meet, but
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about what we should report on, and what is important, what should be there. Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe that there was just, since our last meeting, the department posted some information relative to the number of EFA students by residents. And I just glanced at it, but it's, I tried to get copies for today, but communication with copying service in the LOB didn't work as I envisioned, so I don't have it with me, but I think that's very interesting information.
And what, can you sort of remember roughly what it was all about?
It was each town and the number of EFA students from that town.
Oh, okay, that would be good to know.
Is that the zip code form, the zip code sheet that we had?
This
Or is it
listed
by the
town
the
name.
name of the town, not
Name
just
of
the
the
zip
town,
code? Got it, got it.
And we should have the number, the total number of students.
I think we have that.
Can we have the financial aspect of this in terms of we know they all get the base adequacy, but some get differentiated aid. I'd like to know how the differentiated aid stacks up in terms of those three categories, F&R, then we had English language learners, and what's the one, special ed?
Is this something that do you wanna talk about that? Can you address it? Or are you totally unprepared?
So I can print
for you all. Is that helpful? I'll get this printed.
You have to speak up louder.
Sorry, I can print copies of the report that
Okay.
the Representative Cordelli is talking about.
The
Since we're in
differential-
my building, this is helpful, that's easy.
differential aid.
The part, Madam Chair, that I was asking for, we know that we can get an average, what the average cost is for a child that's in the EFA program. Can we break that down a little further though, in terms of, you know, how many are receiving just the base? How many people receive this portion of differentiated aid on top of that base?
We can do that, we don't have a predetermined report, so it would take
Yeah.
us a little bit to figure that out. But what we have is, on the website, we do have right now, it looks just like the regular adequacy spreadsheet, where you see the town by town,
Yeah.
how many kids receive base, how many receive EL, and how many receive special. We have that, so I can print copies of that. And then your other request will take a little bit of time for us.
Do we need the total budget for EFA? What it has, the report is due in November, we should know what the previous year, the total number. And how many students are enrolled?
I think we'd probably get that in November for this current year, and number of students in the EFA program for this year.
We do have the number of kids that were enrolled as of August 1st for the first payment,
Okay,
so.
now Senator Archuleta, the minutes here reminds me, you had some questions. You said there are a list of questions that were asked, but had not yet been answered. Do you have,
We went through a not insignificant number of them in the last meeting.
okay?
Yeah.
Do you have any outstanding questions right now that you feel should be part of the report?
Oh, yeah, are we at that point right now? We're ready for that? So, there was, since our last meeting and today, I have had, a conversation with the Legislative Budget Assistance Office, who are trying to do the audit. I believe everybody here is also speaking with
I
them,
think
is that
they've met
correct?
with all of us.
Everybody's already met with them? Maybe I was
I
the
met
last
with
one.
them, and they said,
I
they
haven't.
told me
Oh,
that they
you
were
haven't?
gonna
Oh.
meet with everyone.
Oh, okay, alright, so I wasn't the last one.
So it was interesting to see that some of the things they're looking into is very similar to what we are looking at.
Yes, exactly. It's my understanding that the LBA's report is not going to be finished in time for us to be able to
Right.
incorporate it into our report.
Right.
But it will be a really helpful piece of information. But one of the things that I think we should be, incorporating into our report is that we don't have the kind of data that we need in order to assess the financial impact on the local school districts, which is part of our charge, because we don't have a projection as to what that's gonna look like. I mean, we can project it out sort of with some of these numbers of how many kids are in the program right now. But, you know, that, we need to know that, cause that's going to be the impact on our schools since our grants are running out.
Okay,
And additionally, the compliance report, I have not seen the compliance report that was issued yet. So, and it's unclear to me, and maybe someone here would know, that, the re-verification of when they did the very, very small audit, that resulted in, you know, some compliance issues that had to be resolved, and there needed to be re-verification, and that has not been completed yet. So I think that would be important for us to put in our report.
When you say compliance issue, what particular parts?
Well, in the small sampling that the department did, over the first 2 years of the program, it was discovered that, in the 50 student application pool that they used as their,
Yep.
that 12 of those, were either incomplete, they did not use required documentation for
Right.
pay stubs, and, you know, they didn't verify their income, and so, didn't send in the tax returns. So, you know, if we were to project out that, a sample size on the program itself, that's a couple $1 million. And so we need to know that they are now in compliance with the income verification that's required to enter into the program.
I thought that some of those things had already been addressed by
Well,
the Children's Scholarship Fund in the
we don't
report.
have, I mean, maybe somebody said that, but we don't have anything tangible. And if we do, I would love to have it. But when the Joint Legislative Performance Audit Committee met, they were not given any, re-verification of compliance.
Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. Yes, I'm not sure if I printed this out or if it was given to us at the last minute, but this, at the last meeting, but this is the, I think the compliance report issued by the department. And in the back, it does have the corrective action plan showing that 4 out of the 5 items identified had been fully implemented, and that 1 was partially implemented.
That's the one, the July 24th, 2024 report, right? This is one? This,
I believe so.
yeah. You know, there has a list of the compliance and which one, the high risk and low risk, and in what areas they were deficient in. And I know that I saw the report from the Scholarship Foundation, and many of those things they had addressed, and they were working on the last one, I think. But you're right, they had accepted copies of pay stubs instead of a full income report, so those things were not proper, and they are correcting them. As far as I have been able to read. Did you wanna add something, Representative Ladd?
No, you're just talking about income, and of course, the question was, what type of income are we talking about? Are we talking gross,
Right.
or what? That, so I thought the report said they were addressing that.
Yes.
With their data program and with the training manual. That's something I'd like to see, I'd like to see the revised training manual for those that are implementing this program or making those decisions.
You'd like to see the revised?
Well, there were a number of recommendations throughout the report that dealt with that very issue in terms of the scholarship fund developing, I get the specific recommendation, shall update the CSFNH procedural training guide. And that's, you know, it was addressing a number of issues like verification within the 30-day period. What data are you looking at? That was all to be incorporated in there as upgraded for training personnel that are looking at this and making the decision of eligibility or not.
Representative Codelli.
Thank you. I would just add that if we are going to include the compliance report in with our annual report, that I would like to see a statement or documentation from CSF about their addressing all 5 of the component items, that all 5 have been completed, as well as possibly the updated manual that has been referred to.
I thought we had the report from the CFA.
This does address some of
Yeah,
it.
right,
Yeah, it does address some of it.
yeah, there's their report.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think we'd like to see a more up-to-date, definitive, exactly what has been done. Because I noticed a lot of, not mistakes, but things were accepted that should not have been accepted.
Well, has that program they call Civicore, CIVI Core, has that been updated to reference these concerns which were mentioned in the report?
For finding number 1,
Well, in terms of eligibility, determining whether the person's free and reduced meals, all those were things which were mentioned within the compliance monitoring report.
so I believe that 1 through 4 have all been fixed. All of those issues have been fixed.
Within the data processing form.
Correct. And then and staff has been trained, and all of that documentation is available for Department of Education to come in and review. Any mistakes that were made, that all of those funds have been returned to the state. Regarding finding number 5, there's actually a way for us to verify finding number 5 that the student has been, that the family has been verified within 30 days. Technically, there's no way to do it within the database. We're getting into the weeds right now, and that's what we're still working on within the database. In the database, there's a field that's called reporting to DOE ready. That is the field that says that the application has been complete. There's a separate element to Civicore that you email the family and say your application is complete. However, there's no single field that truncates them both together. So that's the issue that we're having problems with and that we're trying to get fixed by March. So you can verify it, but you have to do it on an individual per pupil basis. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to allow it so that you can prove to the DOE in one batch. So Brian can go in there and he can verify it one individual at a time out of 5,000 students, but we're trying to create a mechanism where we can report to him all students at one time.
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
Yeah, I know.
That's,
I'm happy to go through each finding with you one at a time too.
are you saying, just so I'm understanding this, are you saying the reporting out to the DOE that all students have been verified you want to do in one batch? Or the alternative is to send the name of each student individually?
Well, we don't send names, we send SACIDs, but so when someone comes in.
The ID number, yeah, for the
Exactly.
program.
So what finding number 5 was, can you verify that
Yeah.
the student that their application has been processed within 30 days once you receive all of their documents, once the application is complete, right? So oftentimes it could take weeks, it could take months to receive all of the necessary documents that you need in order to verify an application, tax returns, IEP documentation. So once you have all of that documentation, can you prove that you have verified that child is eligible within 30 days, right? So it is in the database and we can do that. However, there's there's just no field that once you execute ready for DOE, and then you send that email manually, there's no flag that says, boom, it's been done. What you have to do is you have to correlate the ready for DOE date, and then you have to go find the email on each individual student's account. And that's what we're trying to come up with, a more seamless process so it's easier for a performance auditor to verify that it's been done. And again, we're working with a new technology platform, and we're hoping that this will become more seamless and easier to verify.
I was reading somewhere in the report that you were updating the software program or adding something to it so that you could have the data.
That's what we're trying to do, exactly.
Okay.
So that when a performance auditor comes in, they're not going to each individual account and trying to look through a student's application for ready for DOE date, and then going, because you have to understand these student families, they receive 30 or 40 emails, all sorts of different emails. You're qualified or this or that, or it's just a lot of data for them to go through. So we're trying to make it a more streamlined process.
So maybe that's a question that we have to wait for the answer.
Okay.
Being aware of the question is that we don't have the answer yet.
And with regard to things like the tax return, again, finding number one, we did re-verify that all those students were eligible. That documentation is there for the DOE. They can come on in, they can look at that documentation and re-verify that those students were eligible. And we are, again, no longer accepting PO boxes, even if it's if it's a student with an IEP, if it's a government document. A lot of this, some of those students, they live in towns where they don't have physical mailing addresses, right? The post office doesn't deliver to them. So again, we've updated our New Hampshire residency documents, what we'll accept, and staff has been trained on all of that.
Representative
Thank
Pinelli.
you. If I might, Mr. Southerton had mentioned the monies returned to the department, and I've heard and read various numbers. Could you tell us how much has actually been returned to the department?
I don't have the figures in front of me, but I believe is it around $16,000? So 2 students,
18,163.
18,000. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I believe that the student that I believe it was a family that appealed. They were over the income limit. They had lost their job. They appealed, and the issue was that I believe that staff used net income on their unemployment documentation and their pay stubs instead of using gross, and they needed to use gross, adjusted gross income.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's more than one student though, because the total is more than, is more than, even if that student were in the program for the full 3 years at the full amount, it's still over that number. So it's gotta be a couple of students.
So it was finding number 2.
Yeah, did you, housekeeping matter, Madam Chair, I'm struggling to get on internet. Is there a Wi-Fi password, or it's, like, what is the, I keep getting bounced out saying no.
Can somebody provide us with
Does anybody know what the Wi-Fi is?
password?
Which network you're on?
I'm on my phone.
Okay, good enough. iPhone 263, I see you.
Okay.
Caitlin.
Caitlin's coming in.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you have a question?
yeah, is there Wi-Fi? What Wi-Fi network are we using here?
We'll have to give you a special password, so you
Okay.
can request those. And I also,
All right, that's why I can't get in.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see, pardon me,
You've got the,
yeah, I didn't want to interrupt
what
you. but
packet, what
I
page?
see, finding number 2. One example in finding number 2. One example in finding number 3. And then one example in finding number 4 where monies were returned.
Oh, I can't get into that till I get. Could you state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Matt Southerton, Director of Policy and Compliance at Children's Scholarship Fund.
Thank you.
Sure. And so I think that we already talked through finding number 2. 2 students were identified. 1 student, the family, we used, what was it? We did not use AGI, which we should have. So those funds that were returned were $14,582.79. Okay, so finding number 3, $11.36 was returned. This again was an application was denied. An appeal letter was sent by the family. Let's see. And again, it appears that they did not use AGI. Yes, they used net and not AGI. And then and I think I said that was 1136. So that's 2 instances of AGI was not used. And then the third issue in finding number 4 is really sort of unique. These are 2 students that were, English is not their primary language, so this was an interesting one. So 2 students were found to be ELL. They were also foster students. A family was fostering them.
Yellow.
English is second language.
Oh.
English
What's-
language learners.
English language learners, pardon me.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, pardon me.
When my kids were little, it was ESL, so.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's a new
That's
one.
probably why I said
That was a second
ESL.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably why I
Just
said
second
that.
language,
No,
alright.
pardon me.
ELL, got it.
So they're English language learners. They were being fostered by a family. Obviously, documentation is moving between the state and them. And so they received a WIDA assessment score that said that they were not proficient in English, right? It was an old documentation. When the team was reviewing the documentation, they were not sure whether or not this was relevant. If it was it valid, right? Parents, the foster parents didn't know. Apparently our team contacted DOE for guidance. DOE met with the team, and it was just very, very murky, right? They could not basically our team did not want to disenfranchise these students. And so the decision was made, we're gonna we're gonna move ahead, we're gonna designate them ELL. We got the best advice that we could, at the time. Later on, department decided, they were not eligible for this, and CSF is refunding the money. And then on a meeting on 8/15/24, DOE met with CSF, and we now have access to a new mechanism within I4C, I believe, that allows CSF to see up-to-date information so that we know if the students are eligible, which is not a mechanism that we had access to. That DOE could speak on this better than I. Apparently school districts have access to that, but we did not. So I'm gonna err on the side of, students with special needs. I'm gonna err on the side of students with, English language learners. We contacted DOE and we asked for guidance. So.
Is the reason, I'm sorry, I think I'm missing a piece of this. The reason that there was any question about them entering the program?
Oh, no.
Because the foster parents were not income eligible?
I
Like, what's
left
the-
out an important part, so,
Yeah.
so they were eligible for the EFA program. I believe it was just specifically whether they were eligible for the English language learner grant. And DOE can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But it was the English language learner grant, were they eligible for that aid? So again, we had documentation that said they were.
Additional money.
Additional monies, correct.
I see. So you're not saying they pulled out of the program, you're saying that CFS pulled back the additional
To my
money.
knowledge, yes,
Okay.
correct. So it looks like we shall reimburse the state for the 2444. That's my understanding, and again, DOE is here, they can correct me if I'm wrong. And again, it was during the summer, the foster parents, the district was great. The local district was great. They tried to work with the family, and they just said, we cannot provide that updated testing with you at this time. We would be happy to test these students. We just don't have anyone that's able to help you with the testing right now. But when school starts and those folks are available, we can provide that testing. And I believe the students, tested after school started, which was great.
Sorry, tested out of needing.
I believe they
help?
did. Yeah, I believe that they did.
Okay. So the school department, the public school in that district did testing for the kids who were already pulled out of the public school.
Correct? Yeah.
I got a question about this. So in this particular situation we're talking about, and child is now working with a foster family,
Yes.
and when the foster family, supposedly in a different district, school district, I don't know if they came from another state or if they were in a previous school, wouldn't the information that's available on that child from the public school in which they originally came from have the information whether they're receiving this portion differentiated or not? And if they did receive it, why would we not accept that from that original district?
I do not know. Again, I was not involved in these conversations. I only saw this as like a look back, and I was only involved after this. But again, they met with DOE, and at the time, that was apparently that discussion.
Okay, this is going to my next portion of the
Okay.
question. We're seeing this in regard to foster children. There's been bad situations occur prior to them getting into a foster family, and I don't want to talk about what happened in the southern part of this border, but it's happening with other states like Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts, which we have compacts with HHS and DCYF. Is some of the holdup on your getting information a result not of DOE but of HHS when the child is placed in the foster family and we're not getting that information?
I would not know. I have very little to do with the application team. I don't even have access to that, to the parents' documents.
If I could just answer that question a little bit, in that I believe that very often the foster care parents might even get a notice that they're being moved to another foster care household the day before that they are picked up to go to the other foster care living situation. So sometimes it's a matter of getting everybody on the same page as to where they are and what where the information is going. So it can be a timing issue as well. I know that applies definitely with transportation and getting the child on a bus to the new school.
Which could be totally different,
Right, yes.
so.
Going back to our, the scope of what our report, so part of our charge, and again, being a little inarticulate, because thank you for this, but I can't seem to get on this network. But we are charged with, reporting out how this program impacts local school districts. And so to that part of our report, we need to find out what is how the procedure, like how are we going to roll out the phase out grants? Like what happens? Is just over? Do we send notifications? Should they go out as quickly as possible? Because we know that budgets for school districts are March. You know, like how are we going to be in line and respectful of the deadlines that our communities have, knowing that they're going to have to start making up the difference on this money. So what does that look like? You know, that might be, I don't believe there's anything yet in statute, but that might be a recommendation for legislation, because that is also part of our charge, to make recommendations for legislation. That's one, and,
Could I ask a question on
oh
that?
yes, please,
You're talking about the phase-out grants?
yes, I am,
Okay, I missed that part.
yes, the
Thank you.
phase out.
I believe that they end in 2026?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so the budget discussions that are gonna start happening now, and contract negotiations, all of that, our towns need to be able to project out what that loss is gonna be, 'cause it's gonna come out of our municipal our school budgets. So,
Okay, I guess I'm not really following you.
no reimbursement grants anymore.
Are you looking to find out how many kids are gonna leave their zip code public school to do something different next year?
No,
Okay, how are you gonna assess what the impact is gonna be? What the number of children you're gonna have?
excellent.
So how can you do that without knowing who's gonna stay there and who's not?
Well, I mean, I don't know. One thing we will probably have to do is use past as precedents and look at migration in and out,
Wait.
town by town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I don't see how we can, if there is a pattern, and you can sort of foretell, depending on past pattern,
Mm-hmm.
talking about Kamala right now, how can you make sense of saying anything that's gonna impact the financing or the budget of a town when they don't know? They don't have a glass where they can look at it and say, okay, based on past performance, we're gonna lose 2 kids this year, 3 children next year, but none the following year. How, I don't see how you can expect the towns to do that.
Well, exactly, but, I mean, we have to figure out something, because we now have 4 options for education. And we know what our costs are for our brick and mortar public schools, right? We know what our costs, and we can project out our costs for both that and our charter schools. And we know what our obligation is to VLAX. So those we know within a certain framework. What we don't know is how much this program is gonna cost. And right now, the state has been picking that up through this fund, and the towns are gonna have to pay out for these vouchers. And so we have to be able to, stratum, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at how many students in my district, for instance, are already out. So what does that look like to the cooperative school district? What does that impact? It can't be just we don't know, we kind of have to wing it, so this is the kind of thing. Thank you.
But year by year, you find out families who like to take the children out and put them in another school.
But we're paying for it now, so we gotta figure out how and how much. It's not just like, it can't be a free-for-all.
No.
I mean, we gotta come up with a way to figure this out.
The state pays the tuition to the school for the kids who are leaving. I don't know what to say, the 50% right now?
It's at 100% the first year
That was
after they
the
live,
previous
because
one.
we pay in arrears.
Right. But
So the
now we
first
have
year
the
it's
second,
100%,
this is the
then
second
50, and then
batch.
25.
I thought we were through with the first 3 years. The first 3 years
It
are
ends
done.
in 2026.
So we have a new batch of kids that we calculate every year for the kids that left. So we'll be doing that through 2026. And so in 2026, will be a new batch, the last batch of kids, and then they'll have payments in 27 and 28.
Right.
But
So right now, the school is getting what, 50%?
The second year and 25% the third year.
The third year, 25%.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it seems to me that parents have to let the school know that my child will not be returning in the fall. So you make the adjustment, but that first year, the school will still be reimbursed, say 50%, and 25% the year after that.
Okay.
So that gives you 2 years, and I think of the school as not just an educational institution, you also have to think in terms of business. And if you have kids leaving and you're getting some money coming in, but in the long run, depending on how the school performs, you may go down in your budget. But it seems to me that the school administrations should be able to accommodate for that and take a look at the budget saving things. You can't just go with the same budget year after year after year, and the kids are leaving, and you still say, this is what we have, and we need the money, because whether you lose the kids or not. It seems to me at some point, the school has to take a look at what their expenses are, where they can cut, and what they need to do. And I think with the sort of tuition reimbursement for a couple of years, that should give them enough time to make some adjustments. But that's my personal feeling. I don't think that you can just have children leave and get the tuition, then you just count on that thing going on forever. At some point, you're gonna have to see, what do we need to do?
Right, exactly. And so that deadline is looming over us right now, cause it's ending. And our municipal budget committees and our school districts, we need to give them as much information as possible so that we can make smart choices. And philosophically, I disagree with you on schools are a business. They're not, they're an investment in our communities, just like our libraries and our parks. They don't make money for our towns, they make our towns better. They make our communities better. They create a community in New Hampshire that is educated. But we still have to pay for it, I get that. But when your school finds out in the 11th hour, because if you are suggesting that parents should make a commitment at the end of a school year that they will not be coming back, so that the municipal budget writers can know this information, that could be legislation that we have to put in to make this program work.
Madam Chair. But thank you. You have to remember that children leave a school for a myriad of reasons, not just an EFA. They move, the family moves. So are you saying that a family, in order to leave a public school, has to notify them in 6 months in advance that they're gonna move to another state? In addition, in terms of the loss to the school.
They wouldn't take their
finish.
Tufton Borough money out of state. We're talking about in the state.
If they move to Berlin,
Yeah,
right? That school district
yeah.
is going to be losing one student,
Mhm.
right? So before the parents move to Berlin, do they have to notify the school 6 months, 9 months in advance so somebody can incorporate that into a budget? I'm not sure where you're going with that, but also in terms of if that child is an EFA student, they still get a payment. The first year it's 100% because it's in arrears, and then there is the phase-out grant, as we've talked about. But perhaps someone from the department can correct me, but I think that the total statewide impact of phase-out grants is somewhere in the name of $800,000. It's under $1 million statewide for phase-out grants. So we're not talking about a huge amount of money because that money is spread throughout the state. So, so it's not a huge impact when the phase-out grants go away to any one particular school. Plus the fact that that is just a portion of their state money. They still keep all the local money that goes to which is 2/3, 3/4, still stays with that school's district. That isn't touched. So there is not a huge impact on phase-out grants to school districts. I've been told that some school districts don't even know that they're getting phase-out grants.
What schools are those?
I just wanna make a comment. You say the schools exist to educate the children and should not be looked upon as a business.
Right.
I can say hospitals. They exist to take care of our sick and help us stay healthy. Hospitals have made so many changes in order to be able to function, to stay in business. They have changed the way they look at the staffing, they have changed the way they use technology. So I think if hospitals can take a look and see what do we need to do in order to stay afloat, I think the schools can do the same thing. You can't just say that we have to educate and you can't touch it, you have to stay the same.
We don't pay for our hospital through our municipal budget. We don't pay for our hospital through our municipal budget.
When
Our
you pay
municipal
when you
budget.
go in as a patient, your insurance.
We're
pays
talking
for it.
about our municipal obligations. Education is an obligation by the state. The state doesn't run a hospital like this.
That's
You
true,
don't,
but I'm
you don't
just-
go get a strep throat, you know.
I'm just talking about
Yeah.
how you look at the finances
Right.
and where you can make cuts without
Sure.
destroying the fundamentals that you're supposed to be responsible for,
Exactly.
okay?
I think we are absolutely on the same page there.
Good, good,
Yes,
excellent.
we are on the same page, that responsibility to the taxpayers is part of our charge, so that we can provide some basic services in the state. And in the municipal level, what we have are things like schools and fire departments and police departments and libraries and parks. These are things that we all contribute to and we all enjoy, and when we don't use them, you don't get a refund. Like, you don't get to go to the library with your book that you bought or someone gave you and say, you know what, I'm not gonna check this out, so I want my $14.99 back on it. You don't get a rebate on not using the services that we have that we as a community have agreed make our communities better. So, but we still have to be responsible with taxpayer dollars, and we're looking at 45 million that we've spent on this program. So we have to put forward legislation through our report as recommendations for keeping track of this and making sure that we don't slap our municipalities with a huge bill.
I don't understand how we can be slapping our municipalities with a huge bill. I don't know what bill you're talking about. I thought we were talking about phase-out grants, and we've said, and correct me if I'm wrong, Department, but it's under $1 million a year for phase-out grants.
Yeah, I had it just pulled up and now I put it away. Brian, you know, it's 850,000.
It's around $800,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, 887.
887?
For 2024.
Okay, thank you.
$887? Thank you.
If I might also mention, since we're talking about compliance reports, the department also does monitoring of public schools, if I'm not mistaken. And they have that information available on their website. So I know that's not the charge of this committee, but perhaps some committee should look at the public school compliance reports as well.
Yeah, I was told that old schools are audited for their compliance. regardless.
I don't think it's all schools each year, I think there's a select number that are audited each year.
The Department of Education has monitoring responsibilities for federal funds, and so those responsibilities are defined under 2 CFR. So, public schools or any entity that receives, federal funding from the Department of Education is monitored by the Department of Education, on a cycle usually determined by a risk assessment.
So the Department of Education is monitoring the expenditure of federal tax dollars that are coming into the state for the purposes of education.
That is correct.
Okay, so it may follow that this committee and the legislature should monitor with audits this program in a similar fashion, since it is funded by taxpayer dollars. And right now, so perhaps in our report, we can recommend, obviously, we need some more fine points put in the legislation, since there seems to be such pushback from, getting cooperation between the Department of Education and the EFA fund for auditing purposes. So, you know, that is something that we actually have the ability to put in our report, that we need to tighten up that language.
So the fact that the LBO is looking at it and researching it and checking on it, you want something in addition to that?
Well, the audit division director, Christine Young, she has said very publicly that she has encountered not insignificant problems in conducting this audit, because she cannot get the full scope of information that she can see with other state contracts. So this is a state contract. Let's give the LBA the ability to do an appropriate audit, so that we are looking at all of the things that other contracts are verified, how other contracts are audited and verified, because it's public money. You know, it's not a donation from a foundation that comes, that they get to make the rules. I mean, this is our money, and that's what we're supposed to do, that's our job.
If I could point out,
Representative Ladd?
I'd just like to make a comment, because I've gone to the New Hampshire DOE website, and I pull up the page Annual Fiscal Monitoring Report. It's dealing with federal dollars, sub-recipient monitoring procedures. I looked at, for example, year FY20. I noticed that there were 45 school districts which had to get into the business of corrective action plans. So I think what we got going on here is that, and this should be understood, that this is probably going to be a common thing. There's going to be something that's non-compliant with a federal grant of some kind, where for no negative reasons, it just was either an oversight or couldn't comply for some odd reason. I believe that's going to be so of the EFA program as well, and I think that by our having corrective action plans, we are monitoring and we're doing what we should. We're being accountable to the public. So, I saw the report that came out of the DOE, and some are saying, hey, this is, typical stuff that you're going to see with any type of grant money coming down. I don't think we should be just identifying the EFA program as non-compliant. We have the same thing occurring on the public education side. And these are large districts. These are districts
That's
all
not
over
our
the state.
charge though, like, that's not what we're here to do, like, that's another group of people.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
We're the oversight committee for EFAs.
And we should be
So,
doing what we're
like-
doing here, but I don't want it to
Yeah.
appear that, this one program's the bad apple in the bushel. It's not so. It's common activity or accounting practice to do what we're doing and what we do for the federal stuff as well.
Yeah, I don't know, it's,
Representative
you're
Fidelli.
putting judgment calls on
Thank you.
things that aren't, I'm just,
I just wanted to mention that the LDA EFA audit is underway, is my understanding. And that from everything I've heard, that some of the original requests of the LBA went beyond what is required in other state contracts, and went way beyond that when they were talking about the EFA program.
How did it go way beyond? What?
In terms of the information they were looking for from the contractor.
So what you're saying is that the LBA asked for information through the course of their auditing from the Children's Scholarship Fund that they wouldn't ask another third-party state contractor?
That is my understanding.
Okay, and who is saying that though?
That's my understanding from talking to various people.
Are any of these people willing to come forward and go on the record about this? Because the LBA is saying very clearly that they are looking to review the eligibility of participants, the controls for determining qualifying expenditures, the identification and recovery of ineligible disbursements, procedures and controls for transferring funds to the scholarship organization, procedures and controls for the phase-out grants, public reporting of participation, student outcomes and expenditures, and the demographics of qualifying applicants for the first year of the program. So they're very public about what it is they're looking for, and saying that the audit division director has said very clearly they are running into problems with compliance in getting this information. So
And I was
if,
just,
like, this is the state agency telling us this, if there are random people spreading rumors about how it's
There-
too much, we need to know who they are.
there are a
Like,
lot of
it's-
people spreading rumors about a whole bunch of things.
Well,
But let me just say,
this is
the
what we're
main,
talking about.
the main point here is that audit is now underway. And there is agreement on what's going
Yes.
to be done. Thank you.
well, there's not agreement on what's gonna be done. The audit is underway, and the LBA has been very clear about what they need to do an audit that they are statutorily bound to do, and what they have run into problems getting information about.
I'm sure that
So-
if when this report comes out, that the performance audit committee will take a look at all of that.
Okay, that's, and just to be clear, the Performance Audit Committee has been expressing frustration for over 6 months now on getting information from the Department of Education. So I think if we could all be very, not be obtuse about this, that the LBA has asked for information, the Joint Legislative Performance Audit Committee has asked for information, and they're not getting the information. So while I am as hopeful as the next person, and genuinely hope this, that there is a newfound compliance, that we're gonna have a fully vetted audit, if past is precedent, it's not looking great. But I'd love for it to not be the case. So our charge is to write a report prior to this report, and I would hope that there's not a feeling of like, we'll wait until we get that, because we have to write our report. And I think we've uncovered some things that need addressing.
One thing we have not talked about is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
quality of education. Are these EFA students getting a quality education?
Excellent question.
But it seems to me that every time something like this comes up, the students who are using EFAs are put in a different class, that they need to be monitored to see, okay, these students are getting money. They don't go to public school, they have chosen to go maybe another public school or a private school or maybe a religious school or homeschooling. And now we're all concerned with they are gonna learn, they are being educated. They're being put aside to look at differently just because they have EFA backing them up. And to me,
Yes.
that is not quite right. I mean, if they go from one public school to another public school, the performance should be better because they're in a better environment for them. Or if they go to a religious school or a private school, all those schools have parameters that they have to follow. Why are we then singling out students who are using EFAs and looking at them differently as far as the quality of education? What are they getting?
They're getting taxpayer money.
Well, so do the public school students.
Right, and the public school students are we account for those public school
Yes.
students through public school boards that we elect,
But
through audits that public schools don't have the option of sort of not giving all the information. We can go through a public school budget, line by line, dollar by dollar, and we do. We don't have any access to a private school's curriculum or how they spend their money, but we're contributing to them now. That's why it's appropriate for us to ask,
So if,
because we're paying for it.
if a child using EFA to go to a school because he can get a better education there, he's gonna be treated differently.
How is that better? Like, what, this is right there, what you just said is the measure of the education. How do we know? What are we paying for? How do we know we're not sending a kid who's gonna end up doing underwater basket weaving for 7 years? Like, you don't know. There's no measure. We don't ask. We don't qualify what a graduation looks
Well.
like outside of our own public institutions. And, you know, we don't tell St. Thomas Aquinas, this is what you have to do now because we're giving some of your kids money. We don't tell homeschoolers, this is what you have to do because we're giving some of your kids money.
Representative Ladd.
There are a number of ways that we hold public education accountable, or charter schools accountable, or the EFA program accountable. And some of them are through testing, very objective, some of it's formative testing. But, you know, we also have another way of assessing whether a child is learning, and that's through the attitude and the emotional status of that child. And if they're in a school where they're having a difficult time, where it could be any kind of situation, obviously the parent's saying, I don't think my child's progressing, I wanna put them over here where and if they really excel, that's wonderful. It could be a charter school. It may have been for all those reasons we've talked before about why children move. But my one concern I would have, again, on accountability, because we've talked about this a lot. This subject's been talked over and over and over again when it comes to adequacy finance and how we're developing a foundation formula. And it's been talked about on both sides of the aisle that we need to be able to have greater accountability for the dollars we're putting in education, be it EFA, be it the regular program. When we look at some of our achievement scores, they're miserably low. And in mathematics and language and literacy, etc. So I know that within the EFA program, we have 3 methods of assessing whether a child is performing. One, we have the statewide assessment where they're welcome to come in. I'd like to know the percentage of people in the EFA which are taking advantage of that channel. Or we have norm reference testing where the parent may opt to take some other kind of norm reference test, which is, you know, nationally normed against a normed group. It may be a reading test like the old-fashioned Gates-McKennedy, or it might be some things like the California Achievement Test or the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. It's fine. They're all nationally normed. The third step we have is where you have the assessment of the portfolio done by a certified teacher. And I'd like to know the percentage of kids that are doing it in those 3 categories, understanding that a norm reference test is not going to be really showing you much in grades K, 1, 2, 3. You know, as a school administrator and teacher, it was very difficult to really get, you can out-level norm things and all that, but we didn't really start any of our formal stuff until we were getting in about 4th grade. And we do it in this state in 3rd grade. I also question how we're assessing in the high school. We have an SAT, or maybe you use an ACT. But SAT is what we use, and that's done in the 11th grade. that's not necessarily reflective of the curriculum in that school. It's based upon whether your child might be successful when they go to post-secondary education. Might be successful. So I think this whole issue of accountability, we need to nail down on this. There's a lot of different ways of having accountability. I, for one, think that the classroom teacher knows what's going on, and so does the parent. So I'd like to know the percentage of kids taking advantage of these, because we should have a lot more in the portfolio, seeing that there is no norm reference test that's going to show you anything for a second grader, unless that second grader is really achieving above the level that of their age, and there's some like that. So this is an area I'd like to see us look at in terms of not just EFAs, but also in regular public education. And for that matter, charter schools as a public school are part of that equation.
So you're talking about a measure for their achievement using the 3 methods.
I'd like to know the percentage of the kids doing it by norm reference testing, by the statewide assessment, and how many have taken it, and it should be a larger group in that, because most of our kids are going to be K through 3, K through 4. I would assume at this program, at this time and space where we are, in terms of the duration we've had the program working.
Representative, based on what you just talked about, EFAs having accountability through testing, what I think is missing, and I'm right there with you on the testing, norm reference tests, or portfolios. What's missing is that whether the student takes it or not and is successful in the measure of that particular test, we'll never know. We don't know. So we actually have no idea. We don't have a standard for review of portfolios. We don't have a benchmark for any of this test. Kids can go through school outside of the public school system and virtually never have been measured for achievement, and we will have helped subsidize that all the way. And and we have to be very cognizant that this program does not reflect what it was originally sold to us as, which would be an option for parents who are of low income to move their children out of the public schools to a space that better served their needs. Because we know from the reporting that over 70% of the students receiving EFAs never went to a public school. And we've had enormous pushback within the legislature to create a process by which we honor that original idea of the EFA, is that it would provide an option for students, families for whom the public school or the charter school or VLAX wasn't working for them. And instead, we now have people who never stepped foot in a public school and instead immediately go for the EFA and start in kindergarten with an EFA, start in the first grade with an EFA. So we don't know. They might have been great in public school. We don't know. So that's not the way the program works anymore. That's, that might have been the idea in the first place, but that's not how it is playing out. And perhaps we need to reflect that accurately in our report, that we have a not insignificant amount of students who never participated in the public school system to begin with.
Are you saying then, excuse me, are you saying then that you should not even be thinking about applying for EFA unless you have attended public school first?
I didn't say that. I said the
But you said
legislature
they have
has been cool to that idea. And so the legislature is cool to that idea. Okay, fine. But we cannot continue to perpetuate the original idea that this was an option for low-income families to access education when the public school didn't work for them, because a number of these families never went to the public school. So it's a different demographic than we originally thought it was going to be. So moving past who's actually in the program, how are we judging or affirming that they're actually getting a solid education? We don't, like, maybe that needs to go in our report, that we recommend that, you know, there be benchmarks on the norms testing, if you choose that your portfolio be reviewed by an, you know, an age or grade appropriate teacher, not just any teacher. That we put a little more accountability into the program. Just a thought, like, we're gonna make recommendations, so.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. I keep hearing we, I guess that means us,
Yes,
right? I'm more concerned with someone else I'd consider them, namely the parents, right? Because they are ultimate, have ultimate responsibility for the upbringing and education of their children. And so when I hear we should be judging, no. The parents should be judging, and that's what they do in this program. And in terms of benchmarks, that we would set some arbitrary benchmarks. Well, you know, we don't set benchmarks other than a target for proficiency levels in our public schools. And how many of our public schools are meeting those benchmarks? And if, in terms of parents having to go to a public school before they choose an EFA, you know, they can see what's going on in their local public school. Maybe an older child went to that public school. Maybe they have friends who have gone to that public school and can tell them what goes on in terms of the academics, safety, and et cetera, in that public school. So I don't think that maybe a requirement that they go to a public school is at all valid. I think very often the observation of what is going on would be sufficient for a parent if they wanted to select a different option for their child.
Agreed, and up until 3 years ago, we've always had school choice. Like, parents have always been able to take their child out of the public school system or never enter and go to another option. We have offered public, charter, and VLAX, and lots of students, in fact, over 92% of the students in New Hampshire use those 3 options. And parents have been, there are plenty of parochial schools in New Hampshire. There are some areas where you can't spit without hitting one. There are tons, lots of options, lots of private schools in New Hampshire. We have a proliferation of them. You can go there, you always have been able to go there, but the state didn't fund it for you. You're always able to buy a book on Amazon, but it's still available at the library. You can have a mapped out backyard with a pool and everything, but your town still has a public park. Once the taxpayers start funding your choices, yeah, there's a little accountability that needs to happen. So if we're talking about benchmarks, we can see benchmarks met by the public schools. In fact, we asked them, and you know, the legislature of last year put in 101 bills to, you know, hone in on public schools. And yet, when a student goes off into the wilderness of choosing, you know, private school, parochial school, homeschool program, all of the accountability of what they might be learning goes out the door. Yes, it should be the parent's choice, but if the parents want to get money from the state, then we get to have a little bit of say, and maybe your kids should learn to read.
And maybe public school kids should learn to read also.
That's not our charge, Representative Cordelli.
Well,
And that's another conversation. Our charge is the EFA kids.
right.
Yes. And if you want to talk about the public schools,
Well, you were
let's
just
do
talking
it,
about
but
the public schools, so I'm talking about the public schools.
I'm bringing it up in reference to where we are allowed and where we have accountability, because it's taxpayer money. So I go to my school board, I talk to my principals, We have accountability there. I know where the money goes. In our last school board meeting, the budget got shaved by $163,000 and like 53 cents, oddly specific, but nonetheless, we made that choice. If the state's gonna pay into a program for education, yeah, we get a little bit of a say on what you do with it.
But looking at that, the state pays for each child to go to public school. That's our taxpayer money that
Yes.
goes into public school. So
Indeed,
they should have accountability, the same thing that you have with the EFA kids.
yes. EFA kids should be as the EFA outcomes should be as accountable as
Not
public school outcomes.
outcome,
What is yeah, but we have graduation requirements in public school. What's the graduation requirement for children who
And we
take
have
EFA?
proficiency levels of under 50%, but 90% graduation rate.
So maybe we sink some more of our time and efforts into our public schools.
So
Because
we
that
send
benefits
more,
no, did I say that? I did not say that. I said time and energies and legislation. If you wanna raise the budget at your public school, by all means, go for it, but that is not what I said. And we are talking about the EFA kids. It's well established that we have access and influence at our public schools. Lots of it, lots of it. Those budgets are made by us and our neighbors. The EFA, we just give money away and we don't ask for accountability. And so, based on Representative Ladd's ideas of should there be accountability through testing or norm reference tests, those things are available, but what are we measuring? Why are we doing that? Why do it if you're not gonna use it as a benchmark? Why?
Well, you mentioned my name, so I'm gonna
Please.
chirp in here. I was stating that, for example, the SAT, does that measure necessarily what is being taught in your school district? Because your district can teach US history at the 7th grade, and Senator Wards might do it in the 9th grade, but the test might be given in the 8th grade. And so the test that you're giving isn't measuring what they've been taught yet in that district, but in your district, yes. So we're gonna see scores like that appear, and if you look at ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and look at the indicators, which we have in statute, for what are the indicators that a student has met the conditions for graduation. Graduation is one, enrollment is another one, attendance, ASVAB, and you go down all the different types of things which are there. There's a lot of ways of measuring whether the student is successful. We're looking at in the post-secondary level right now, offering some courses in post-secondary which are more career-oriented than the traditional academic taught in the class,
Yes.
and which is a good
Great
thing.
idea.
So this issue of accountability, I believe it needs attention at not just the EFA level, but it also needs attention at the local level. If we're spending all this time as a 5th grade teacher preparing for the statewide assessment, and they spend a lot of time preparing for it, you talk to teachers and saying, hey, I could be using that time for instruction in the classroom on a formative task that the child needs. It's accountability is something which we've looked at instruction, we've looked at curriculum, but the third leg of the whole thing is assessment, aligning the assessment with what we're teaching and what we are supposed to be teaching from the curriculum. And I don't know if our assessment tests are really doing that. We
Okay.
talk about competencies, we talk about academic standards. I don't want to go down that road right now. We've done that a million times. But the issue you're talking about is
Yep.
the same issue that I'm talking about too. The accountability, we have 3 methods that are formalized within statute for the EFAs. We don't know how many kids are taking advantage of either one of those. We don't know what the results are. And maybe that's what we want to look at, is some of the results. But those results are not necessarily going to be a measure of what that student skills and knowledge that student knows.
If I could offer one more measure of accountability for the EFA program. We know how many students enter the EFA program. How many of those students leave the EFA program and go back full-time to their resident public school? How many students maybe go to private school A and switch and the next year go to private school C? I think those are measures of accountability in terms of satisfaction with education options. And the other measure on the other side is how many EFA students are choosing to leave public schools. That's a measure of satisfaction also. So maybe parental satisfaction is a measurement we should be looking at as well, because I believe we do that for the tax credit scholarship program.
And we do it in the charter schools, we have the thing we call wait list. And if there are more students applying, then you get in the lottery business. You look what happened down in Washington DC, and those charter schools have been very, very, very effective. But I'm glad we have these alternatives within America here, and the choices. And I believe that overall we do a pretty good job, but there's a lot of areas we got to clean up. And I see it in every one of those programs. So I could give you a number of areas we need to clean up.
Oh, yeah, no one's asserting that any of them are
Nobody's
are
perfect.
Perfect, and we're always looking to improve it,
Yeah.
which is what we're doing here. It's
And that's what
improving
we
on
need
the
to do.
EFA program.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a little, where there are things that we cannot find the answers to. So I got a lot of notes here. Good talk.
I do have one, when we're talking about what do we put down as our recommendations. We had the issue of the City Corps and the training manual. Is there a process, you all at the EFA program, Children's Scholarship Fund, make these changes, but is there a process for approval of what you do? In other words, is that passed through DOE? Is it sent to your advisory commission that we know that it's not been as effective as we would like to see it?
So
In terms of the parents that are on there.
So the advisory commission will be meeting in October. When we make an update, like we just updated all of the policies, well, not all of the policies, revised a number of the policies, we revised the parent handbook, and we revised the provider handbook. That generally occurs in August, and then we'll send the updates to the department for any feedback that they have. And if they have any feedback, obviously we'll incorporate that into there. And I believe that the department does have some feedback on one of our policies, and then we'll obviously update that again and post that online.
Should the advisory commission membership be appointed by the director, or should there be a wider scope of people on that commission?
I believe we have to have a minimum of 7 people from 4 different counties. Yes. And then 1 non-voting member from the department, and then from the
And the commission.
correct.
When is that meeting?
I believe it's in the 3rd week. I don't think it's been scheduled the exact date, but we'll certainly let you know.
Well, why don't you send us the date?
Okay, absolutely.
Might visit, depending on where you're gonna meet.
Yes.
Have we exhausted the topic?
I'm done.
Well, have we exhausted the topic for today?
I think
My next question would be, who else do we need to talk to? Who else would you like to hear from?
I was looking through the list that we had prior and identifying some, the list that was given had by, how many students by zip code. And, this is much more helpful, I think. But nonetheless, there are some districts that are gonna have, you know, somewhere in the vicinity to 30 to 60 students, who are receiving EFAs, and I think it might be helpful to have the administrators from those, couple of those districts come talk to us as stakeholders in the program.
And
So
what would you-
Rochester was one of them.
What would you like them to respond to?
The impact on, look, I mean specifically impact on their
If
local
there is an
budget,
impact to that
Yeah.
particular school.
impact to their school.
In line with those, maybe administrators or headmasters from other schools that might have some EFA students.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you want us to conduct a survey annually, or does that need to be put into law? Or, because I know that we do one for ETC.
I'm sorry, I thought you were asking,
Oh, yeah, I just didn't. I was a little confused whether you wanted us to conduct a survey of EFA families annually, or I didn't know if that had to be put into law.
I think that the organization can do things
Okay.
without government mandate.
Well, okay. Right. Well, then I think we're probably gonna plan on that, and then if you have any feedback on what you would like to see in the survey, please send it to us. I don't have a problem including that.
but we can still have some superintendents from public schools with a lot of students. Do we have the list of number of students?
Just EFAs, not total enrollment.
Yeah, there's a,
Yeah, this is just
if you have there was a list from our last meeting that by zip code, or no, it was 2 meetings ago by zip
Okay,
code.
I'll look it up.
And some, there are some towns that have multiple zip codes, like Rochester has 2 zip codes and Manchester has a couple of zip codes.
Okay, well, let's make some suggestions. I can think of maybe Claremont or Newport or one of the poorer districts. So we can work on that. Let's see what time is it, 1:30.
Alright, so are we coming back to the next meeting with some suggestions for content? Since we're coming up on our deadline?
Yeah,
That
but I
we can
thought,
all, like,
but the next,
give
we
feedback
should have
on?
a couple of stakeholders, it's a couple of people that we can talk to, particularly for the impact on their.
Yeah.
Discuss whether or not there is an impact on their budget and then how they perform.
Mhm.
So, we can have a couple of those, and then we can certainly, take a look at what has been suggested today and see if we can come up with some reasonable, topics to address in the report. Now, one thing that we have not talked about today, which has been suggested or talked about a couple of times, is whether or not there should be an evaluation of the person's income or family's income
Annually.
before they start in middle school and before high school. And I don't know if that's something that people are concerned about or wanna do something about, but
I
that's
think we've had legislation pretty much every other year.
We've had that discussion, and one of the concerns is that if a kid qualifies due to income of the family, and then the following year, the income goes up,
Right.
does the kid come out of the program? It's just, that's not gonna be an educational program where the kids can be like bouncing
Right,
all
right.
over. Should there, if we are gonna look at this topic, is there gonna be a transitional period of some kind, or, so that the education of students not disrupted, you know, the interactions with other students is not distracted, because that's really important stuff. Okay?
But wouldn't it just mean that they would lose their EFA money? Wouldn't mean that they would have to leave their educational choice? Right, if the family income increased, they would just not be eligible for the funds, but it wouldn't mean that they would have to leave the school.
See, we had a similar, or not similar, but we had in the tuition program, we had a bill, which is now law, where if, for example, the tuition from school district A to B, and B jacked up their costs above what A is willing to pay, the student can now pay that difference. The family can pay the difference, as long as there's another anchor type school, which the student has an opportunity to go to without having to pay anything. I think that I would like to see, if we ever go down this road, which I'm not really encouraging us to do it, but there be a transitional period where, you know, maybe the parent whose income has gone up, whatever it is, has still something in that game, but not, you know, they're gonna to have to pay more, or
Well, the support reduced a little bit.
or the support
Instead of getting
reduced.
the full,
The
they get a little
support
bit
from the
less.
EFA reduced. And while they're in elementary school, because most kids, they get ready for a move from middle school to high school, from elementary to middle, in various districts. My district, it's K through 3 and grades 4 through 8 are middle, and the high school is up, but that's different in every district you go to.
Right. I don't like to see if the child is doing well in his school, I don't like to see that education being disrupted.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's good in the long run. It's, but we can noodle it.
To the point, like, if you're making more money, then you don't need the EFA. Like, if you don't qualify, you don't need it.
Depends on how much the tuition is.
How much is more? See,
Right,
that's
but
the
these
issue.
schools,
Right.
like, schools have their own financial aid
Right,
issues, so
right.
that's now, like, that's
Right.
outside the realm now. Just like peers who don't qualify for the EFAs. You know, if you wouldn't qualify, then you don't qualify. That doesn't mean you can,
Right.
you know, if you're 500% of poverty, you might not be able to afford a private school because you've made other choices about where you live, what kind of cars you drive, what kind of activities the kids do. We can't, like, we're not, I think we're getting into, ground where we're making value judgments. If parents want to pay for their kids to go to school, then fine, go for it. You have a public school, you have a charter school, you have VLAX, and if you make enough money, you can pay for your kids to go to a private school if you want to.
If you make enough money. As you said, we've always had school
Or-
choice. For the wealthy, we've
Or-
had school choice.
Or get the financial aid. We have a lot of schools here with very, very large endowments. In fact, there's a high school in my district that gives 100% tuition for families who make less than $80,000. So we give more money to families and they give 100%. And technically, those day students who go there could get the EFA too, and just use it on something else, the way we have our program set out. So I'm just saying, there's some places to tighten this up.
Anything else? When do you wanna meet?
After the election.
After the election, that's a whole month.
Oh, no.
Can't afford to wait
No,
that
can't
long.
afford that. Are Mondays the day?
Mondays are okay.
Yeah.
Unless I have another meeting.
Okay, so the 14th is a holiday.
I do have a calendar.
21st? That's 1, 2, 3 weeks from now.
would be my fourth meeting that week. And I got civics all day Tuesday in this building right here. 24th and 25th is UNH trustee meeting. I could do it on the 21st, but it's gonna be
I could do Monday the 14th in the morning.
That's a holiday. I don't know who else is traveling, but
what day is that?
Columbus Day.
If you're in Alaska, they don't celebrate Columbus Day
Oh,
up
the
there.
16th in the morning.
It's Vitus Bering Day.
It's what day?
Well, Bering Strait.
Yeah.
No, you do
Russian
it.
that came over.
Yeah.
21st.
They're more than that.
21st.
Works for me.
I hear 21st of October.
21st October is okay with me.
1 o'clock also.
That's better.
1 o'clock will be fine with me. There's a special education Zoom in the morning.
What?
So-
So is that with Jean Bergeron?
I don't know. I just have it written down here, so I'm
I
assuming I
just
have
had a
some
call coming from her
information.
non-member.
So should we say 21st of October at 1?
Okay,
I'll have to-
whereabouts?
Find out from Aaron what room we
Okay.
can have.
Where's the space? We'll just be little nomads with our bags.
Okay.
Okay.
Unknown caller.
Anything else that we need to cover today?
I didn't even know the name of the person calling.
Oh.
Unknown caller.
Then I'm looking for,
I would like to do
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
To the audience, thank you for coming.
Good talk.
Good job. Appreciate your presence.
What's that?
I have the hardest time taking notes. I'm not
Oh, yeah.
I think in the future I'm just gonna, I go to the video, that's what I did last time. Go back to the video.
And do you use a transcription service?
Those are awesome.
If, so, on YouTube,